hear all about Gargoyles.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We are officially going to go ahead and start. So welcome. Thanks for being here for the first panel, first time slot of the day, being awake and being present. We're going to talk about Gargoyles, which is celebrating its 30th anniversary. Just some quick information about who we are. I am KTabulous on the internet. I have little cards if you want to grab on the way out, but this is where you can find me in various locations all across the internet. I do stream on Twitch and do a monthly podcast where I talk about nostalgic, esoteric cartoons, and those are also available on YouTube. We've actually done an episode on Gargoyles, if you'd like to check that out for the anniversary. Okay.
Yeah, hi, I'm Kirsten, or Kay. Honestly, I don't do any of the social media stuff, but
You're just happy to be here.
Just happy to be here. I watched Gargoyles a little bit as a kid at my grandma's house, or Oma, as I should say. And as a kid, I thought, oh, this show is cool. This is neat. And then I reread it as an adult. I get all the classic references, and it was so much better as an adult.
I'm Nate. I'm Zippo on YouTube. I'm a late adopter to Gargoyles. I only watched it during lockdown when I had so much more time to catch up on old TV shows, and I missed out in the first run. It was very good.
So some old fans and new in the room. So I like to, on each of my podcast episodes, the homework I give my co-host is the show in 5 words. So for me, the show in 5 words is where we're going to talk about what it is, for those of you who, again, just have a faint memory, we'll refresh you on the main plot points. Fantastic world building and cohesive storytelling, because that is truly what it is. From start to finish, there are very few skippable episodes, because there is no character or plot line, however wacky, that doesn't actually tie to this very detailed, character-driven whole.
For me, best introduction to classic literature.
I was thinking I only needed 4, but now I see we're allowed commas. So, no, it's exactly. World tour of mythology. I love how they take all these amazing mythologies, they blend them together in a cohesive way that makes sense. We're in the Avalon arc right now on our rewatch, and there's so much wonderful chemistry between characters. And then if I'm getting a comma and a 5th word, I'll go with growth. You see characters grow. Nobody is static on the show, like in so many other kid shows. You want to look at the other Disney afternoon, you got your Darkwing Duck. He's great, but it doesn't change. You got the Rescue Rangers. They're great, but it doesn't change. The Gargoyles change. The villains on Gargoyles change.
And by the end of the series, the world has changed because the Gargoyles are unveiled and suddenly must exist, and humans must acknowledge that this mythology exists all around them. I love both of their summaries. First of all, introduction to literature and mythology. It does take a lot of stories from all different cultures around the world and ties them together in ways that you just never thought there could truly be this multiverse of mythologies that work, and characters that grow and change and that you truly fall in love with. So I have the ripped from VHS. This trailer was tagged onto a few of Disney's VHS releases to kind of hype up the fact that there were these videos of the first 5 episodes of Gargoyles. Kind of like Return of Jafar, which is the sequel to Aladdin, is actually just the first 5 episodes of the Aladdin animated series. They kind of pitched these first 5 episodes as a Gargoyles movie. I apologize, the audio will be a little low, and it's going to have this lovely backtrack of nostalgic 90s music, courtesy of the Kalahari.
It is an age of darkness, superstition in the sword.
It
is an age of fear. It is the age of Gargoyles.
Just get a Bluetooth speaker or something.
What could be strong enough to make columns in solid stone? trust no one.
That's one thing we have in common. Everything's going according to plan.
You see the text flashing in, that's exciting. And dark and gritty, and wow, Disney in the 90s really pushing the envelope with the darkness.
They wanted their own Batman.
Yes, honestly, this is definitely in competition with Batman animated series of time. So there was kind of a push. I think in 90s cartoons you see a lot of what I would call gross out body horror here. This is the age of Ren and Stimpy. But then there were also a few animators seeing this trend of like, we can do weird stuff in kids' cartoons now. And so they took that to a place of what if we told dark, beautiful stories. So in a nutshell, it first aired in 1994, created by Greg Weisman, who, if you are a Twitter user, I'm not going to call it X, you can follow him, and he regularly is still tweeting about all the stories he never got to tell. And some of those are now beginning to come out to light because he's been able to produce more comics, expanding the world, and the story keeps going on and on. The cast is incredible. We mentioned in our little pre-panel talk that there are multiple members of the Star Trek cast. We have Daddy Keith David, who is one of my favorite actors of all time as our hero Goliath, and he also plays a few side characters. So just a lot of talent and love and thought went into this program.
We could do a good panel on just Keith David.
Yes, maybe a sexier voice.
Next year, Keith David Appreciation Panel. And I would describe the plot overall as cyberpunk meets cryptids and historical fantasy. The premise is essentially we have a core group of gargoyles from Scotland in the 10th century. They're frozen in stone for 1,000 years by a curse that is actually tied to a whole plot of betrayal and a backstory that, like, there's a whole separate story about the gargoyles before the show begins that we get through the storytelling and the flashbacks. But it's cyberpunk in that it's this edgy 90s feel of like there's lots of tech and what's the potential of genetic engineering and nanobots and environmental science. All of these things were very trendy at this time. So you take these mythical creatures from the past, you wake them up in Manhattan in 1994, and they adapt and go on many adventures, fight many villains, including David Xanatos, who's our main villain, a tech, I don't know, a Google mogul that has enough money to raise their castle above the clouds and bring them back to life. So I'd like to talk to each panelist and ask why Gargoyles matters to you. And I'd also like at some point to have you guys share any feelings or stories you have about Gargoyles as well. So I'll start. Gargoyles matters to me because of everything I've said so far about why it's an incredible story. Fun fact. I watched it on television when it was sort of rerunning on some Disney Adventure channel as a high school student, fell back in love with what I remember from as a child, and then in college I wanted to watch it again. So I had to join a file sharing program, which
Yay!
Before the internet was kind of cool, you had to have people online at the same time willing to share their crappy MP4 rips and VHS tapes with you, and it took 6 months to download the Gargoyles series. And I waited 6 months. Every time I booted up my computer, I could see that little bar just itching along. Now you can stream on Disney Plus. It's very easy to watch. Higher quality, but some editing, some censorship has taken place.
Well, to expand on my first point, it being the best introduction to classic literature, I loved that Greg Weisman had so much respect for the characters such as Macbeth, Puck, Oberon. They are presented in their form as you know them, and they're not watered down to appeal to the kids. And I also loved that when we're having the Avalon arc, we're also tying into Elisa's heritage with having Anansi, the spider, and some Native American mythological figures. And I thought that was so cool. Yes, please tie this into the main character and I thought it was so neat that when she's in the African village, her mother is there telling the myth of Anansi, and it's like, all right, that ties in what their family, it ties in where their family is from, their heritage, and I think that's so cool.
I think representation is a good part of the legacy, so I'm glad you brought that up. Lisa Maza, the cop who befriends the Gargoyles, is part Nigerian and part Native American. So having a biracial female hero who is a gun-wielding cop is sort of radical, and that's just the tip of the iceberg as far as representation of actors, animators, and stories that they told on the show.
And indeed, going off of that and the cultures represented, has anybody else here watched Mighty Max back in the day? It's, not since Mighty Max has there been a show like this where it's so educational and so fun to watch without being condescending. There's all of this world culture and this world mythology presented in a fun, easily understandable way. There's lessons along the way like gun safety. They tackled gun safety head on and not in a manner that guns are bad, just be safe with them. It was great. You know, people like Elisa need guns in their daily life. You don't see much shooting after that, but still. Yeah, I wish I had had this growing up. It was a great show.
That's a really good point. Does anybody remember the gun safety episode of Gargoyles? Okay, wow.
It was pretty early.
Yeah. It is one of the first episodes, and what I love about that episode specifically is Elisa is shot in an accident where she didn't lock up her firearm, her police firearm, in her apartment. But they take her to a hospital, and you see her family, and the doctor is explaining to her, or to her family, what the bullet literally did to her body. And I think that is an element of gun safety that we don't teach the kids often. It's just like, guns are bad, lock up your guns, don't touch guns. But explaining like what guns do and how they actually cause harm to the body, I think was an incredibly powerful lesson. Yes?
What I really liked about the episode, as sad as it was, it showed that he can be shot by anybody, even your closest friends, because he was shot by Broadway.
Yeah, if you could hear that, she said what you like about it is that you can be shot by people you love because it's not just about gun violence, it's about gun accidents. It's a good statement. We're going to talk about characters. This is definitely where we want to hear from you guys. Maybe, Nate, I might even charge you since you have the wireless to go offer to people.
Sure.
So my favorites, I said pick a favorite. I did two, because I think in this show, the villains are just as well crafted as the protagonists, and that is part of what makes it so powerful to watch. So on the bad category, of course, we have David Xanatos. He is unlike any villain that we saw in show. I mean, you think about Ninja Turtles, it's always just a dude, you got the brain and the mech armor, like it's always just a crazy guy, and I'm gonna get those turtles. And David Xanatos is a businessman. He's savvy, he owns multiple businesses that are in charge of tech and genetic research, and just kind of wields money. He's like a reverse Batman.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
it's a little similar to Kingpin if you watch the Spider-Man animated series. He's largely villainous and acts in his own self-interest and just wants to crush Spider-Man. But when it's to his interest, once in a while, he'll help Spider-Man solve a really big problem to fight a really big bad guy.
The villain is not, oh, I hate those gargoyles. In fact, he might kind of be obsessed with them. He's
obsessed. He built a tower just to put their castle on top of it so that he could break the curse. Of course he's obsessed
How much
with them.
Xanatos and Goliath / fanfic is out there?
Ooh.
Probably a scary amount.
probably a scary amount. He clones them. He builds robots that look just like them. He builds a mech suit that looks just like Goliath, and he can be Goliath. He's obsessed with them. He's fascinated by them, and I think because his core purpose is he's fascinated with power.
He's a tsundere.
Yeah, he's...
Or is it a yandere? I always forget.
He doesn't hate the gargoyles. Like, his motivation as a villain is not, I'll get you, which is a very boring kind of villain, but it's mostly present in comics and cartoons. His aim is power, and he seeks power by immortality. He's obsessed with finding the secret to immortality, whether it's magic or science. He thinks living forever is true power. And he's just so dashing. Apologies for the feedback. My goodie, who I know my friend over here wants to talk about. Oh wait, no. Who said Brooklyn? oh, it was you, okay, let's make sure. Brooklyn. There were a lot of protagonists that could steal our heart, but I wanted to mention Brooklyn because I think Greg Weisman had a lot more in mind for him that you can see fleshed out in some of the comics that have been released. But he, amongst the young gargoyles, I think struggles the most with his place and understanding what it means to become a leader. He is chosen as the next leader after Goliath. And he's very childish and stubborn, but it's all part of watching him grow up. And I just kind of love that about him.
Me too. That's one of the best things, one of the most significant growths you see in the show. As Brooklyn just go from basically a man-child into a competent second in command.
For me, I absolutely love Hudson. I love how he learned to read from that author who was blind, and I am a book nerd, and again, just all the classic literature being tied in, loved it. I also loved Princess Catherine's growth. She goes from saying, gargoyles aren't allowed in the dining hall to becoming this absolute mama bear and protecting the hatchlings and eggs and saying, nobody messes with my gargoyle kids. I absolutely love how she grew that way.
I would not have thought of Princess Catherine, but wow, yeah, and this is from the kind of backstory that we do get to see throughout the series fleshed out.
Am I tired and hungover, or is that the kid from the Gummy Bears in the bottom middle?
They're not very similar.
Fun fact, Gargoyles at the pitch meeting was actually sort of pitched as another gummy bear. So the gargoyle design originally was like kind of cute, little chibi, like we're the gargoyles. And then I guess maybe they already had that in gummy bears, so I think that's why they shifted to like, well, let's kind of emulate that in the animated series, go darker, go more realistic.
Oh man, now I want a death battle.
Would anyone in the audience like to talk about any of their favorite characters?
Would anyone like to chime in? If you don't want to be on video, you don't have to be.
For me, one of my favorite characters from the Gargoyles was always Brooklyn. I loved, much like you guys, I loved the growth that his character had from where we first met him in episode 1 to where we saw him at the end of the series. And even when they did like the future, just kind of the kind of like future foreshadowing episodes, how he really came into his own as a leader when Goliath wasn't there.
Thank you. A lot of love for Brooklyn.
Yeah, I was surprised and pleased. I also pulled up these images of one of the episodes I love with Brooklyn as the B plot. There are these people who have been kidnapped and forced to become mutates against their will, and Brooklyn finds one of them and is like, a girl, and he wants to, go out and be like, hey, we could be a thing. And she is horrified by him, and she tells him, I'm not like you, I'm not a monster, because she was a human transformed against her will, and he is what he is, a gargoyle, and that really hurts him to be viewed that way, which is an anchor of the whole story, is like the humans don't accept the gargoyles. So a big theme of the show is just that acceptance.
And when you're a gargoyle and you're in their circumstance, your options are kind of limited, so you can't really blame them for getting a little excited.
And when a young girl gargoyle shows up, I mean, it's all over. It's like, which one of us is gonna get that girl? We haven't seen a girl gargoyle. It's just us and Hudson and the dog, Bronx.
Anybody else have a favorite character you wanted to chime in on?
So I kind of have two favorites. One, agreeing with you, I liked Hudson's character because growing up I liked the mentor kind of characters, and where you could get like generic with, just give advice whenever needed. No, Hudson was in the same situation as everyone else. He was learning as well, but he still had like the wisdom from all those years ago. And it's like every once in a while, he would be able to help, but he would also learn with them, even if he was just sitting at home with the dog. But my other favorite character is Demona, because, talk about villain arcs. Mm-hmm. She started off being like pseudo okay with humans, but then over time being one of the ones to just like one of the first ones to awaken and just hating everything. And then there's the episode where she goes back in the past to try to be like, dude, no, don't do this. But then you see it's her past self, so she's like, what are you talking about? I'm not gonna be like you. And you're just in here like, about that. But yeah, I just like her as a villain, like a pseudo-villain as well. I really like her character as well.
She was a great villain.
Demona is iconic, and this is an image from the episode you referenced. Demona goes back in time and she's like, don't be in love with Goliath, like your love will bring you down, will tear you apart, you need to be strong, you need to be tough. And Goliath tells Demona's younger self the opposite thing, like don't give in to your hate, don't give in to your anger. And that is the core conflict of Demona, is that she thinks she's driven by love. She's, my people, my kind, the gargoyles, the human hate us, and I will protect mine against everything. But what that ultimately leads to is her hate for humans consuming her rather than her love for her fellow gargoyles. I do have a hot take on Demona, which is that I do think she is irredeemable. I do think there is a redemption arc written for her in the comics, certainly not in the show.
Oh, and that's another point.
But I think she's gone too far. Yes, please.
I'm gonna say, actually in the show, I would say she got almost so close, very last minute, especially when she was trying to reconcile with her daughter. But clearly Angela found out what she was really doing, but then at that last minute, the mom was like, what have I done?
She has those moments of clarity that really shine a light on the struggle, but I think it's like universal, like everyone can relate to this, where it's just like, because we have a lot of people in this world who think they're fighting for a cause, and I'm on the side of good, so I can justify anything I do for the good. There's a really fine line between love and hate, protecting what you love, and sometimes taking that too far and hurting those that you see as others or outsiders. We'd also like to talk about some of our most powerful moments. So we're already talking about Demona. The episode City of Stone is a 4-episode arc which teaches you everything about Demona and Macbeth and why Demona is still alive 1,000 years later, even though she wasn't frozen with the other gargoyles. You learn about her betrayal, kind of leading to the gargoyles being cursed. And the moment that really sticks out to me, and actually I tweeted months and months ago when I was doing my podcast 4 random images from the show, and Greg Weisman retweeted it. It was like the most interaction a famous person has ever given me. But the gargoyles go so hard, and I just have 4 images, and people recognize that image of Demona crying immediately. The password is alone, which simply means she was trying to turn everybody into stone, humans, into stone and crushing them when they were stone, like basically killing humans and like really realizing her dream of a world where she eliminates every human being. And they finally break her down emotionally enough for her to give them the password to undo this horrible magic science blend that she's concocted. And the password is alone because that's what her story has been for 1,000 years.
She smashes a lot of people.
Yeah, unclear if like, do those people come back a little bit? I mean, the kid shows that.
Come back from what? A pile of rubble?
Yeah.
A better question would be what happens to the pile of rubble after the time change?
Yeah.
Mystic, that's what.
There's a lot of implied body horror, which allows it to be a children's show, like kids can watch it without being traumatized, but you can kind of guess, like, oh, that's messed up. But Kay, what's an emotional moment that's really stuck with you?
I think for me, when Elisa's brother, Derek, finally revealed to their parents that he had been turned into a mutate. And yeah, first they're shocked, of course, like, holy crap, I was not expecting my kid to become this like cat monster thing. But they realize this is their son still, and they're gonna try to make the best of it that they can.
For emotional moments, I hate to keep going back to it, but when Broadway accidentally shot Elisa, he's just a big kid who thinks he found a toy, and he finds out the hard way he may have killed his best friend. And he's a gargoyle, he's a human. He can't really call 911, he can't walk her into a hospital. He's got to get her to the hospital as best he can while not being seen. And he's able to do that, thankfully, because, of course, in these kids' cartoons, New York is never really that busy.
Yeah, that's interesting that I never considered Broadway accidentally shoots Elisa, but he can't just be like, help, help, because his whole identity has to be secret. The gargoyles are not allowed to exist in Manhattan. I love that you brought up Derek, because that's part of another emotional moment for me specifically. The entire plot of Elisa's brother going to work for Xanatos, it creates a rift between Elisa and Derek, because she hates Xanatos, she knows he's a bad guy, but Derek's like, that job's a job. Like, so they're at odds, it's this tension between siblings, and then eventually Xanatos elaborately betrays him and mutates him into this monster. And just the look on his face, you can see in this image when the cure, which never really existed, it was all gaslighting because Xanatos is maniacal, is destroyed. You can just like actually see the devastation on his face, and I don't know, that just hit me in such a real way. Again, there's a lot of implied body horror, and he made me really feel like, because there's so many monsters, you get desensitized. But in this moment, I was like, me as a human being, if my entire body was changed, irreversibly, like what would that do to you in terms of trauma? And I think you telling the story of, at least his parents coming to accept him, I think it'd be an allegory for like disabilities that are unanticipated. Life-changing things happen to you. It's not just what we're born with. Sometimes your bodies change in ways that you never anticipated. And learning to adapt and still see yourself as who you are, I think you can easily see as an allegory in Derek's whole story.
Another good emotional moment I like that we watched recently was one of the later King Arthur episodes during the Avalon arc. And you got Griffin, who'd gone through so much, and in the end he gets knighted by King Arthur. And just how much of an honor that had to have been for him, and he finally has some purpose. That was really nice.
It's incredible how many powerful stories they tell. I mean, it's just shocking what they can fit in, and it never feels wrong. It's just so smooth as storytelling goes. Great writing. Do any of our audience members have an emotional moment or a memory of the show that's just like, I've never forgotten that moment?
I think the story of the little boy, because when he goes to help raise the eggs with the queen and everything, and you see his mom saying goodbye, and knowing that they'll never see each other again. And as a mom now, that's like devastating to know you're saying goodbye to your little son forever.
Anyone else?
I guess in a span, I would just say not one singular one, but throughout the series you see so many characters trying to love and then it's kind of lost to them. So that's always emotional, like especially with Goliath and Winona. Brooklyn, when he ever tries to connect with somebody, it's just a lot. But I will say my favorite part is seeing the slight change in Thanos when he gets with Fox. Is you think they're just together because he said they're genetically compatible, but when she turns into a literal monster and he's like, I will do anything I can to save her, like, oh my gosh, he actually does love her. So any kind of like emotion like that is very sweet to me, like very emotional.
Yeah, they tell emotional stories even through the films, which is incredible.
For me, that was pretty. Oh, there we are. For me, that was pretty memorable. Was the Hudson and Macbeth arc, where they body swapped and just constantly kind of kill him over again when he was actually just captured. Just kind of like the emotions that the rest of the Gargoyles had to go through and all that, and on the back end, how calm and kind of composed Hudson was, and to kind of see, Puck eventually just stick his arm in for Xanatos was interesting, because it was kind of like a reveal moment of like, he's actually real dedicated. What's going on here? Like to that point. It may not have so much of an emotional impact, but it was something that just kind of stuck out to me as very memorable.
For sure, that's a good one. Like Hudson, I think, is kind of introduced in the beginning. He seems like comedic relief almost. Like, I don't want to go out and patrol. I want to watch TV. I'm an old man and a cop dog. Like, it's just like a little bit, but they tell stories with him that you realize there's so much more depth to them.
And it's funny because he seems like this wise old matriarch, but when we meet him, he doesn't know how to read. I expected him to be Goliath's second in command, but of course it ends up being Brooklyn.
Hudson's already, he even says, I've already done that. I'm not going backwards. We gotta go forward. Let's talk about untapped potential. Anything from Gargoyles that we didn't get that we wish we had. And for me, it is Mora Fox. You know, she's introduced just vaguely as like a bad guy. Okay, she's Thanatos' girlfriend. We see more and more through their love story, and we learn about her past and learn that she's actually the child of, you know, incredible supernatural beings. But I still would. I want to know how they met. I want to know everything about.
The pack is good enough to be its own show.
Yeah, and there is a spin-off comic book series called Bad Guys, which features one of the pack members and other various bad guys from the series, kind of like Suicide Squad, but with Gargoyles.
I absolutely love the Cheeto episodes where they go to Japan, but I would have loved to have seen more Asian mythology in Gargoyles. It would have been so cool if they came across a war dragon or one of the Yaoi from Japanese mythology. Just something to expand the world a little bit more, because I understand with the Avalon arc there is only so much mythology you can fit into it, but a little more Asian mythology would have been cool.
I second a little more Asian mythology. We all know there's tons of Asian mythology to dig into. You can get your fair share of that in ghost stories.
Yeah, I feel like they didn't even really tap into Indian mythology, of which, I mean, you know, there's so many great stories.
This may not be what you're looking for, but I wish there was just a little more in the production value. Sometimes the animation isn't directed the best, continuity between shots. A lot of times the audio, they don't sound like they're on rooftops yelling at each other. They don't sound like they're sitting in a helicopter. They sound like voice actors in a studio speaking into a microphone almost all the time.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The sound design is very minimal.
It's a Disney afternoon cartoon. What do you want?
That's all. I mean, what it was, like what it meant to me and to all of us for just being like, churn it out, put it on afternoons for kids. Like, it's an incredible story. And you can kind of tell in the very last episode that they up it, like the animation is way more elaborate, the sound design becomes suddenly good, just because they're like, it was a send-off, you know, for what we've done. Any audience members have something else you just never got from Gargoyles that you wish you did?
Anyone at all? Any untapped potential for Gargoyles? No, for you it's perfect.
All right. Any other questions, comments? I was hoping this would, I wanted to come, but I didn't think they would because it was super early. But I'm glad it's kind of an intimate room because I'd love to hear any comments, stories, anything you want to share, or other panelists, if there's anything we didn't touch on.
Well, we can touch on the comics.
I'll say that one fact. With voice actors, Broadway's voice actor is Patrick Starr.
That's right. Yeah, Broadway's voice actor is the same as Patrick Starr.
The whole voice cast really is phenomenal. From the Star Trek people to the not Star Trek people. But yeah, we wanted to touch on the comics. We picked these up at Free Comic Book Day last month. They weren't free. In fact, they were $5. And the artwork is great. You're welcome to come up and look at these afterward. But it's criminally short, especially for $5. If I can turn to the part that's the comic, it's like half comic and half advertisements for the comic. It's just not a good use of pages. But yeah, it's a great prequel story. They elaborate on Goliath and Damona, as you can plainly see on the cover. I believe it's limited run, 6 issues. I'd say if you can find it somewhere for free, go ahead, but I wouldn't spend $5 an issue on it.
Interesting story about the production and the comic book series. So the show was really 2 core seasons with the core writing staff and the direction of Red Wiseman. And it kind of ended on a note that was like, okay, the Gargoyles have been revealed. Dun, dun, dun. And then there is a 3rd season, which, fun thing about Disney is they don't allow their shows to create more than 65 episodes. And that is so that they cannot pay people raises for having a show that runs that long. They do this all the time. Look at any of your favorite Disney Channel shows. They'll have a certain number of episodes, it's 65, has been since the 90s. And then they will change the show's name. So the 3rd season was Gargoyles, the Goliath Chronicles. Or, you know, Zach and Cody and those dudes on deck, on a plane, you know, They just do that to avoid the raises that come with having a successful show. It's a little unethical, but the third season didn't necessarily go along with the plot line that Greg Weisman had outlined. The first episode lays out the new villains and the new stakes of a world where people know about gargoyles. And the rest is a little more just sort of baddie of the week, kid-friendly fare. But he did want to continue this and planned them all out in mini spin-offs. And there were a few comics that were released, and that was exciting for Gargoyles fans who wanted more. And then the licensing for the rights to reproduce Gargoyles became too expensive for the publisher. So those comics also ended on just kind of a, well, it's done now, cliffhanger. And only now are they starting to reproduce some more Gargoyles comics.
Sorry I'm talking so much.
No.
But with the third season, I actually enjoyed it. The thing is, if you notice with the Corpsman, I didn't notice this until I was much, much older. If you kind of notice, they're kind of coded a little with some other hooded people throughout history, just throwing that out there. And I kind of thought that was interesting how they did that. Like, here's this hate group, and then, we have a hate group, or we have several hate groups here in this horrible country. But, but they did it in a way for kids to understand there are groups of people out there that are going to hate you and probably want to harm you.
I think the only episode that I liked of that was Bronx befriending the little Amish boy. It was cute. But the rest of it, I just have erased from my memory. Especially the animation. The animation was not good for the last Chronicles.
And that through line with the Corpsman, that is carried out in the comics. Like, that was always part of, like, this is the next era is dealing with, this metaphor for hate groups.
Birthday this morning. With the fact that Disney's going back and doing a bunch more of the rehashes of our old favorite cartoons, most recently with the X-Men 97 cartoon that they just started doing on Disney Plus. If they did do something similar with Gargoyles, what would you want out of the new season?
I want the writing to be the same, like keep the classic mythological folklore characters, definitely include more cultures if you can. I also love the character growth. I'd want that to continue, but the way Disney has been writing stuff lately, I don't have much faith in it.
I'd be tempted to say just continuation 20, 25 years later, but the modern setting, the digital era, kind of ruins this kind of storytelling. If everyone can be in contact with each other at all times, if there's surveillance everywhere, there's not as much mystery. It's kind of hard to say what you could do with this going forward beyond keeping it around at the same time, the same level of technology and culture.
That's a really interesting point. I didn't consider, like, Gargoyles in 2024, what would the story be? Because for me, I would just like to see them carry out what I've already read in the comics. Like, the plot lines were outlined for eons. I mean, like, it's so, like, Greg Weisman has shared a lot of this, and if you don't know, there was kind of a gathering. It was actually called The Gathering. For about 12 years after the series ended, there were a group of people that made their own little mini con just about gargoyles. And they ended up getting Greg and Keith David and a lot of the other actors and creators to come to their gathering and kind of, keep their love of gargoyles alive. So I would like to see those plot lines carried out. But Zippo makes an important point about, since the show just set in 1996, like, we just carry on. I don't know how to handle that. I have heard rumors that there's going to be a live-action Gargoyles reboot. This is after it was very much rumored that Jordan Peele wanted to create a live-action reboot, and he was turned down, which sounds insane to me. But then Disney's like, no, yeah, we are going to do that. But now it's hush again, so rumors.
Any other closing thoughts?
Don't have to be on camera if you don't want. I think I saw you first.
I was wondering if you're aware of the non-canon crossovers that Greg Weisman made of Gargoyles, Spectacular Spider-Man, and Young Justice.
I have a vague awareness of Young Justice, but I have not consumed any of that content.
Alright, so yeah, basically, because like Greg Weisman, he worked on Spectacular Spider-Man and Young Justice, so he went at like one of the gatherings. He made a crossover script and like brought all the voice actors from Spectacular Spider-Man and Gargoyles together to read through the script. So it's like it's not official, obviously, but it's a non-canon crossover between Gargoyles and Spider-Man, and then the sequel, as in Young Justice from DC, is all mixed together because it's basically all his babies together in one little thing. And I thought it was pretty interesting. If you guys haven't seen it.
Is like the gargoyle Goliath statue or one of the episodes in like the background.
There's a Goliath, a gargoyle statue in one of the episodes again.
He throws little Easter eggs into all of his things
It's
too.
really cool. I mean, I think his brain is just a fully realized universe, and he's just waiting for people to give him funding to tell all these stories that he sees as interconnected, from his multiple shows to also, every myth that's ever existed, it's actually all tied together. It's all part of this universe.
One thing I think most of us here would be interested in knowing, a while back on Kickstarter, there was actually a Kickstarter for a 30th anniversary edition of Gargoyles. So I think, since I backed it and such, I should be getting my edition like next in July and such, which I mean, since it's from Dynamic Entertainment, I think they'll also release public editions of it. I'm not sure, so I thought you guys might want to know about that.
The series lives on. There's still some efforts going on with it. Be interesting to see where it goes.
There's also a podcast that you guys might enjoy if you want to hear more about Gargoyles. They do like an episode by episode kind of recap. It's called Voices from the Eerie. And they have a lot of love and care for the show as well. Thank you for those of you that shared, the tidbits where we can get more of this. As I mentioned, I have done a podcast episode of this that's available on YouTube. And as well as other weird cartoons if you want more of just deep dives into cartoons. Yes, please.
One more thing, if anybody is interested, literally a few days ago I saw figures of gargoyles in Myers. So I saw like Elisa and Xanatos, and I saw Brooklyn, and I'm probably gonna snatch it when I get back home.
I did hear that there was some new figurines that were out as well. So I hope you guys are inspired to re-binge the series, listen to podcasts, Google it, check out my YouTube channel. And thank you all for being here. This was the best way I could spend my morning and day too at Colossalcon. It's fun to be on the show.
Yeah, thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much. Enjoy your comment. Oh, if you came in late, there's buttons up here. If you would like a Gargoyles button, I've got Gargoyles tag buttons, all the good stuff.
We talked about Lexington, we talked about Brooklyn.